The dining hall on the Alliance ship Celestis Dawn was quiet, filled with soft clinking sounds of forks and trays. Humans and aliens sat side by side, eating together under the cold light of the ceiling panels. Conversations were slow, calm, and respectful until one sentence shattered the silence like a dropped plate. How do humans reproduce? The question came from Corellia, a young alien girl with shimmering lavender skin and wide golden eyes. She sat across from Mark Reed, a human engineer who was halfway through a spoonful of mashed potatoes when she spoke. He coughed, nearly choking, and dropped his spoon back into the tray. Everyone nearby froze. A Talari trader 2 seats away turned her long neck to look. Even the quiet insectoid chef paused his cleaning routine and tilted his head. Mark looked at Corellia, blinking rapidly. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "What did you just ask?" Corellia tilted her head with pure innocence. "How do humans reproduce?" "Your biology books do not explain it clearly, and I want to understand." Mark sat frozen, unsure what to say. It wasn't that the question was wrong. It was just not something anyone expected to hear out loud, especially from someone like her, polite, soft-spoken, and often quiet during meals. "I mean," Mark started, then stopped. "That's a complicated question." Corellia frowned. "Is it forbidden?" He said quickly. "Not forbidden. Just personal." She blinked. "I do not understand." "You humans talk openly about war, death, even bathroom jokes. But reproduction is personal." Mark scratched the back of his neck, feeling heat rise in his face. "Well, yeah, when you put it like that, it sounds weird." She leaned forward a little, her golden eyes full of honest curiosity. "I just want to learn. Is that wrong?" He saw no trace of sarcasm or teasing in her voice. She wasn't trying to embarrass him. She genuinely wanted to understand. He sighed, nodded once, then stood up. "Let's talk." "Somewhere more private," he said. She nodded and followed him out of the dining hall. Behind them, quiet whispers began. The small observation room at the end of the corridor was empty. It had a large glass window, looking out at the stars, and 2 soft seats. Mark sat in one, still not sure how to explain human reproduction to an alien girl who had probably never even held hands before. Corellia sat across from him, sitting straight, hands in her lap. "All right," Mark began slowly. "So, humans reproduce through a process called sexual reproduction." Corellia nodded. "I know that part, but what is the full method? Step by step, please." Mark blinked. "You want step by step?" She said seriously. "I am studying cultural bonding across species, and I want to compare it to my own people." He swallowed hard, then tried to keep his voice neutral. He explained the basics, starting with male and female differences. Then how reproduction involves physical intimacy. He used neutral terms, like biological exchange, cells, fertilization, trying not to make it awkward as he spoke. Corellia listened silently, but slowly. Her posture changed, her eyes widened. Her hands pulled together tightly in her lap, and then her skin flushed. A soft violet glow began to creep across her cheeks. "Are you okay?" Mark asked carefully. I did not expect that," she whispered, looking down. That is much more intense than I thought." Mark looked at her, a bit confused. "Wait, how do your people reproduce then?" Corellia's eyes darted to the window, then back to him. "We do not do that, at least not the same way." There was a pause, quiet and full of awkward energy. "Our bonding is emotional," she added. "We form a mental connection first, sometimes even for years before we join." Mark tried to imagine it. "So you don't touch each other?" "Only when the soul thread is ready," she said softly. "Touch without emotional readiness is considered shameful in my culture." Mark nodded slowly. "That actually sounds kind of beautiful. She looked up at him, eyes wide again. You think so? I mean, yeah, he said. It's different from us, but it's not wrong. For a long moment, they just sat there, looking out at the stars. No more awkward words. Just a quiet understanding forming between them. Corellia smiled gently and said, "Thank you for explaining." Mark, he smiled back, "Anytime." But, deep down, both of them knew this wasn't just a science lesson anymore. Something had started in that room. Something neither of them fully understood yet. After that strange, quiet moment in the observation room. Mark thought things would return to normal. He expected Corellia to forget the conversation or avoid him. Embarrassed, but the next morning she was already waiting for him outside the engineering bay. Holding her datapad tightly, "Mark," she said, stepping into his path. "Can we talk again?" He stopped, surprised. "About reproduction again." She shook her head quickly, cheeks turning that soft violet color again. "No, I mean, yes maybe, but I have questions, not just about how. But why? The feelings behind it." Mark blinked. "Feelings?" Corellia nodded, her golden eyes serious. "You said it sometimes connects with love, with trust, with deep bonds. I want to understand that too." Mark scratched his head. "That's harder to explain than biology." "But more important?" she said, softly, "at least to me." He nodded slowly, then motioned toward the maintenance lounge. It was a quiet place, used by off-duty engineers. With couches, warm lighting, and a screen showing Earth nature scenes, green forests, rivers, clouds. They sat down, and Mark took a deep breath. "Okay," he began, "for humans. Reproduction isn't just survival. It's connection. It's not just about making babies. It's about sharing yourself with someone, your heart, your time, your future." Corellia's eyes widened a little. "That sounds overwhelming." "It can be," he agreed, "but when it's right, it feels like home." She turned to look at the screen showing birds flying above trees. "And when it's wrong?" she asked in a softer voice. Mark shrugged. "Then it feels lonely, painful, or even empty." There was a silence between them again. Gentle, but heavy. Corellia folded her arms around herself, like she was trying to understand something far away. "In my culture," she said finally, "we are taught to hide personal feelings, even love, until the soul thread responds." Mark tilted his head. "This soul thread, what is it exactly?" She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small, glowing crystal hanging from a thin silver chain. "This is called a Velshara. It glows only when our soul is open to bonding. To trust." Mark leaned forward, fascinated. "It glows by itself." She nodded. "Yes, it senses inner truth. Mine started glowing when you answered me with kindness. When you didn't laugh." Mark's mouth opened slightly, surprised. "Wait, because of me?" Corellia looked down shyly. "I didn't expect it. It scared me at first. I thought it was broken. But now, I think it's real." He leaned back stunned. "Wow, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know." For a while, they just sat there again, two people from different stars, trying to understand what was happening between them. It wasn't love, not yet. And it wasn't friendship either. Was something new, like two puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit, but somehow belonged together. Later that evening, Mark found himself thinking about her words, her pendant, and that violet blush on her face. He sat at his desk, turning a wrench in his hand, trying to distract himself, but no matter how much he focused on his work, his thoughts kept returning to her. Why was he feeling this way? She was an alien, from a species with a completely different understanding of connection, and yet she listened, she trusted him. She didn't just want to understand human biology. She wanted to understand the human heart. That thought made him smile. The next day, Corellia visited the engineering bay again, this time holding a small object. It looked like a folded piece of metal shaped into a spiral. "I made this," she said, offering it with both hands. "It's a Keltor. A gift given in my culture when someone shares something precious." Mark took it slowly, the metal warm. From her hands, "Thank you," he said. Honestly touched, she looked at him with a soft smile. "I hope it doesn't make things strange between us." "No," Mark said, shaking his head. "It makes things clearer, I think." Corellia nodded, and for the first time. She sat beside him instead of across from him, close, but not too close, just enough to share warmth and maybe something deeper as they sat together. Watching the sparks fly from a welding drone, Corellia spoke again. "One last question," she said. "When humans fall in love, how do they know it's real?" Mark thought about it for a moment, then answered softly. "They feel safe, like nothing else matters in that moment." Corellia nodded, staring at the flame of her pendant as it glowed a little brighter, and in that small moment, under the cold metal ceiling of the ship, something warm bloomed quietly between them. Not love yet, but the first seed of something that could grow into it. The ship drifted through deep space, quiet and steady like a dream. Inside one of its lower decks, far from noise and control panels, Corellia stood beside a glowing wall covered in ancient carvings. It was her private space, a meditation chamber, used by her people. The Tyler Mark had never been inside until today. She had invited him, carefully, nervously. Now he stood near the door, unsure if he should step in. "You can enter," Corellia said gently. "But you must not touch the light wall unless I offer it." Mark nodded, got it, and stepped in. He looked around at the gentle blue lights and soft floor. The room smelled faintly like flowers, but not ones from Earth, something softer, cleaner. Corellia sat on the floor, her pendant glowing a soft pulse. "I want to show you something," she said, "about my people." Mark sat across from her, arms resting on his knees, listening. "My kind does not bond through fast feelings or quick touches," she began. "We connect through shared silence, shared truths." She waved her hand, and the wall behind her shimmered, revealing an image to Tyler sitting back to back, eyes closed, glowing threads moving between them. "That is a soul thread," she explained. "When we open our hearts fully, the thread forms. And once it does, we feel what the other feels." Mark stared at the image, his mouth slightly open. "You can feel each other's emotions." "Yes," she said, "but only when we choose to let each other in. It is not automatic. It takes trust, patience, and sometimes years." Mark looked down, thoughtful. "That's really different from humans," he said. "We usually fall fast, sometimes too fast." She smiled softly. "Yes, I've seen it in your stories. Movies, one kiss, and they call it love." He chuckled. "Guilty." She stood up and walked to the light wall, placing her hand over one of the glowing carvings. "This symbol means Merhit, the first stage of trust," she explained. "It's what I feel with you." Mark stood too, slowly. "You trust me." She nodded, but her eyes were shy. "Yes, even when others laughed. Even when I asked strange questions, you never looked at me like I was foolish." He took a deep breath. "You were just curious, and honestly, I think curiosity is one of the most human things ever." That made her smile wider. "Then maybe we're not so different," she said, "even if we look like it." Mark looked into her golden eyes. "We're definitely different," he said. "But I like the way you see the world." She blinked slowly, touched by his words. Then turned to the wall again. "Would you like to try something?" she asked. "A memory share, only surface thoughts, nothing deep." Mark hesitated. "Is it safe?" "It is safe," she said, "but you must keep your mind still and honest. No lies, no masks." He nodded. "All right, I'll try." She walked over and reached out her hand. Mark looked at it for a second, then gently placed his hand in hers. The pendant between them glowed brighter, and suddenly he felt something strange. A soft wave of emotion moved through him, not from his mind, but from hers. It wasn't words, just feelings, loneliness, hope, warmth. He saw a quick image flash in his mind. Young Corellia, sitting alone in a large glass room. Scientists watching her through the walls, never speaking, just writing. Mark's eyes widened, and he pulled back slightly. "You were raised in a lab?" he asked, shocked. She nodded, her voice very small. "I was born during a peace treaty experiment, one of the first born on a ship, not a homeworld. Many saw me as a project, not a person." Mark's heart ached. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You don't need to be sorry," she said, smiling gently. "You see me differently?" He nodded. "I see you as someone brave and kind, and maybe someone I want to know more." The room was quiet again. But now the silence was full of meaning, not emptiness. Mark didn't let go of her hand right away, and she didn't pull away. Corellia looked at him and said, "Do you know what this moment would be called in my culture?" "What?" he asked Narathner, the soft step. "It's when two souls begin walking in the same direction." Mark smiled. "Then let's keep walking." And in that small room, between the glow of alien walls and the distant hum of the ship, two beings from different stars shared something neither of them had ever known before. Not science, not language, not data, but something far more rare. Understanding. The next morning, Mark walked through the main corridor of Deck 7 like usual. But something felt off. Everywhere he went, ties followed him. Voices paused, and conversations shifted to whispers. Two officers standing near the water unit glanced at him, then quickly looked away. A group of engineers from the night shift huddled around their screens, pretending to work, but clearly watching him. At first, he thought maybe he had oil on his shirt, but then he heard it. "That's him, the one the alien girl asked. They say he touched her pendant. Do you know what that means in their culture? He's not just teaching biology anymore. He's part of her thread." Mark kept walking, jaw tight, trying to ignore it, but the whispers followed him. Like shadows, he stepped into the maintenance hub, hoping for quiet. Instead, his supervisor, Lieutenant Barron, called him over. "Reed," Barron said, voice gruff, "we need to talk." Mark sighed and nodded, following the older man into the small office behind the hub. The door shut with a hiss. Barron turned, arms crossed. "Are the rumors true?" he asked, going straight to the point. Mark hesitated. "Depends which rumor." Barron raised an eyebrow. "Don't be clever. I'm talking about the alien girl Corellia." The Tylari. Mark straightened. "Yes. We've been talking. She's curious about human culture. I've been helping. Barron repeated, his voice sharp. "People say you're doing more than that. They say you're forming a bond. Something serious." Mark stayed calm. "She offered a cultural exchange. I accepted. It's respectful, not what they think." Barron slammed his hand lightly on the desk. "You may think it's harmless, but it's not. These kinds of misunderstandings lead to diplomatic incidents. Do you understand?" Mark frowned. "I'm not hurting anyone, no," Barron said. "But in the eyes of command, you're walking on thin ice." Mark's hands curled into fists, but he held his voice steady. "She deserves kindness, not silence. She's alone on this ship, treated like a research tool by most. She asked questions. I answered them. That's all." Barron looked at him for a long moment, then softened slightly. "I get it, Reed, I really do. She's not just some alien to you." "Anymore?" Mark didn't respond. He didn't need to. "Just be careful," Barron said. "They're watching, and if it turns into anything official, it won't just be your job on the line." Meanwhile, Corellia was facing something even colder. Inside her people's private quarters on Deck 10. She sat alone at a curved table while two elder Tylari stood across from her. There. Expressions unreadable. You have allowed your Velshera to glow in front of a human. One said, voice stern. Do you understand what that signals? Corellia nodded slowly. It means I feel safe, that I trust him. The second elder narrowed his eyes, but he is not Tylari. He cannot return the thread. Corellia's voice stayed calm, but her fingers trembled under the table. He doesn't need to return it fully. He respects it. He respects me. That is not our way. The elder snapped, you risk shaming the council, the traditions, the very thread bond system our ancestors gave us. Corellia looked down, ashamed, but not broken. I just wanted to understand him. To be understood, the first elder softened slightly. Curiosity is allowed, young one, but attachments must be earned, and only within our path. They turned and left her alone. The room fell silent, and the blue glow of her pendant dimmed. Just slightly, later that day, Mark found her sitting in the quiet corner of the botany lab, surrounded by alien plants with glowing petals. She didn't speak when he sat beside her. She didn't need to. I heard, he said softly. She looked at him with tired eyes. They say, I'm bringing shame just for learning. Mark sighed. You're not. She reached up and touched her pendant, still glowing faintly. It's harder to carry when no one believes in it, she whispered. Mark gently reached over and covered her hand with his. I believe in it, he said. I believe in you. Corellia's eyes shimmered not, glowing. But wet tears, rare for her kind, began to form. I didn't know humans could be so kind. She whispered. I didn't know aliens could feel. So much, he replied in that quiet moment, with petals glowing around them. Neither of them cared who whispered in the halls. All that mattered was the truth between them, unspoken, but powerful. Mark didn't sleep well that night. Corellia's quiet tears haunted him. He had seen many things in space-broken ships, wounded men, entire planets torn by war. But nothing stayed with him like the look in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, just deep, quiet pain. She had done nothing wrong, just asked questions, just shared her thoughts. And yet, both humans and her own people had turned against her. Mark sat at his desk, staring at the little metal spiral she had gifted him earlier. The Keltor. He picked it up, held it tight, and then an idea came to him. Something simple. Something human, but meaningful. He opened his toolbox, pulled out a few old wires, some soft metal, and began shaping them with his hands. It wasn't perfect, but he didn't care about that. What he made came from his heart. The next morning, Corellia was nowhere to be found in the dining hall, nor the botany lab. Mark finally found her in the observation dome, sitting alone with her arms around her knees. She looked small beneath a wide glass window, showing distant stars. He walked toward her, quiet. She didn't move. But she didn't tell him to leave either. I brought you something, he said softly. She turned slightly, her golden eyes tired. Mark held out a small object wrapped in cloth. She took it carefully, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a small pendant, made of wire and metal from his engineering tools. It was shaped like a broken circle joined by two hands touching in the middle. Corellia stared at it, then gasped gently. This is... Mark rubbed the back of his neck, nervous now. It's not fancy, but it's yours. I call it the bridge. A symbol from my culture means connection across distance, across difference. She held it like it was made of starlight. Her fingers trembled slightly. No one has ever made me something before, she whispered. Not with their hands, not for me. Mark smiled. Now someone has. Her pendant glowed brighter, stronger than he'd seen before. And, slowly, without thinking, she reached up and placed the bridge next to her own, glowing. Crystal Mark blinked. "Wait, what are you doing?" "In my culture," she said softly, "when someone returns a gift with a gift, it means something deeper has begun." Mark felt his chest tighten, like a bond. She nodded, cheeks glowing violet again. "Yes, but it's not forced, it's offered. And you may still walk away if you are not ready." He looked at her, really looked, not as an alien, not as a friend, but as someone who had reached across the stars to share something beautiful. Truth, trust, and now a choice. "I don't want to walk away," Mark said gently. "Not from you." Corellia closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to keep her emotions still. When she opened them, she said, "Then let's keep walking." But the ship wasn't quiet for long. By noon, the news of the human gift had spread across multiple decks. Photos were shared, messages were sent. People whispered louder now, not just about a conversation or a pendant, but about a possible human-alien pair bond. And not everyone was happy in the officers' hall. Lieutenant Barron received a formal report, the title, Violation of Alliance. Cultural Boundaries Engineer Mark Reed and Ty Laurie, Subject 14K. Barron slammed the report onto the table and marched toward the command center. Meanwhile, back in the dome, Corellia sat beside Mark. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Suddenly, a loud chime rang across the hall. Mark's wristband flashed red. "Emergency meeting, crew quarters 2. He looked at Corellia already. Knowing what it was about, she nodded slowly. "Go. I'll wait." In the meeting room, officers stood tall, faces grim. "Mark Reed," one of them said, "you are being reviewed for engaging in an unauthorized emotional exchange with a non-human." Crew member, Mark's jaw tightened. "She's not a prisoner, she's a person. She is still under cultural protection law," the officer snapped. "You could cause diplomatic instability." Mark stepped forward, heart pounding. "Then maybe the law needs to change." Gasps filled the room. "She came to learn." He said, "She came with questions and open hands. And you all gave her silence and suspicion. I won't apologize for showing her respect." The room was silent. Barron, standing in the back, didn't speak. But his eyes showed something new, not anger, but respect. That night, Mark returned to the observation dome, tired and unsure what would happen next. Corellia looked up as he entered. She was still there, still waiting. He smiled, and she smiled. Back, no words, no fear, just warmth and something growing stronger between them. Asterisk, the stars outside the ship stayed the same, but everything inside the ship was changing. The air felt colder, the walls felt closer, and Mark's footsteps echoed. More than usual, 3 days had passed since the meeting. 3 long, heavy days where no decision had been made public, but whispers floated in the halls like smoke, and Mark could feel the storm coming. Corellia had been ordered to stay in her quarters, not because she did anything wrong, but because others feared what she might do. Some said it was for her safety. Others called it quarantine. Mark knew what it really was. Isolation. He hadn't been allowed to see her since that night in the dome. Every request was denied. Every message blocked. She was close, just one deck above, but it felt like she was on another planet. Mark sat at his desk, staring at the bridge pendant. She had given back. He wore it now, every day, over his uniform. Even though it made people stare, someone knocked on his door. It was Barron. Holding a small data pad in one hand. "It's done," Barron said, voice low. "Command has ordered her return to the Tylari homeworld. The next ship arrives tomorrow." Mark's heart dropped. "She's being removed?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. Barron nodded. "They want to avoid a political mess. Her bonding with a human is too uncomfortable for both sides." Mark stood, fists clenched. "She's not a threat. She's not a mistake." "No," Barron said quietly. "But this isn't about what's right. It's about what's easy." Mark stared at the floor. He had never felt this helpless before. He could fix engines, patch holes, reprogram systems, but he couldn't stop. Can I see her before she leaves? Mark asked, voice soft. Baron hesitated, then sighed. You've got 5 minutes. And it doesn't leave this room. The door to Kyrelia's quarters slid open, and Mark stepped inside. She stood by the window, her back to him, when she turned. Around her pendant was dark. No glow at all, they told me, she said. Voice calm but distant. I leave tomorrow. Mark walked to her slowly. I tried everything, he said. I'm sorry. She shook her head. No, don't apologize. You gave me something no one ever did. Truth, choice, warmth. He wanted to reach for her hand, but stopped. Your pendant. It's off. She looked down at it. Yes, it dims when the thread begins to break. When distance replaces closeness, Mark took a deep breath. Then let me give you something to carry with you. He pulled his bridge pendant from his neck and placed it gently into her hand, even if we're apart. Even if I never see you again, this means I still walk beside you. Her hands closed tightly around it, and for a brief second, just a flash, her own pendant flickered with light. Again, Kyrelia stepped closer, looked up at him. If I ever return, will you still be here? I'll wait, Mark said. No matter how long. She smiled, and it wasn't a sad smile. It was quiet hope. Then the door beep time was up. Kyrelia looked at him one last time, her golden eyes bright with unshed tears. Goodbye, Mark, she whispered. Mark stepped back, nodding once. Goodbye, Kyrelia. The door closed, and she was gone. The next day, a transport ship docked briefly. The crew watched from the viewing bay as a small figure in a silver cloak stepped aboard. Some whispered, others stayed silent, but Mark didn't. Watch. He stood alone in the dome, hands in his pockets, eyes on the stars. Weeks passed, then months. Mark returned to his work, kept to himself. People stopped whispering. The news cycle moved on. But he never forgot her. In his free time, he wrote not logs or reports, but a message, a story. He titled it, Understanding the Alien Heart. It was part memory, part message, part plea. It spoke of bridges, not walls, of curiosity, not fear, of love, not rules. And somehow, someone shared it. Then more people did, and soon it reached far beyond the ship, even beyond Earth. One night, months later, Mark entered the dome again. Just like always, he looked up at the stars, wondering where she was. Then a voice behind him said softly, You waited. He turned, breath catching in his throat. She stood there, Kyrelia, in a new cloak, wearing both pendants, both glowing. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. They read your words, she said, even the elders, even the cold ones. Mark took a step forward, unsure if he was dreaming. They changed their minds. Some didn't, she said, but enough did. And now I'm not just a subject, I'm an ambassador. He laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. I missed you, he said. I missed you more, she whispered. And this time, she reached for his hand. This time, she pulled it gently to her heart. No more rules, no more silence. Only the quiet glow of two threads reconnecting. The stars above the Celestis dawn had not changed, but everything beneath them had. Mark and Kyrelia stood together in the observation dome, the same place where their bond had begun. Now it was no longer a secret, no longer hidden. It was real, and it was seen. Kyrelia wore a new robrial blue with silver thread across her shoulders. Her pendant glowed steadily on her chest, and beside it, the bridge Mark had made. She looked stronger now, more confident, but her eyes were still soft when they turned to him. Mark, still in his old engineering uniform, didn't care about ranks or medals. He only cared that she had returned, and that she had come back by choice. Ambassador Kyrelia, he said playfully, giving a small bow. You look powerful, she smiled. Only because I carry the strength you gave me. They both laughed quietly, a private moment in the wide silence of space. Later, they sat together in the green room, a section of the ship filled with real plants from Earth and other worlds. The air smelled like grass and soft rain. Mark leaned against a tree trunk while Corellia sat on a patch of moss beside him. I missed this, he said, just sitting beside you. Not needing to explain everything. You always explained everything. She teased. Even things I didn't ask for. He smiled. Yeah, I probably talked too much. I liked it. She whispered. You made human feelings beautiful. Mark looked at her, quiet for a moment. Do your people really accept this now? He asked. Us. She nodded. They don't fully understand, but they've seen that we didn't break anything. We built something new, and that matters. Mark took a slow breath, letting it settle. That's all I ever wanted. He said to matter to someone. Corellia touched his hand gently. You matter to me. That night, a celebration was held in the central hall. Not for war, not for victory, but for unity. Humans and Tylari stood together for the first time without tension in their voices. Music played some strange mix of earth instruments and alien tones, and in the center of it all, Corellia stood beside Mark, holding a small ceremonial box. In her hands, she turned to him in front of everyone, her voice clear and warm. Mark Reed, human of Earth, she said. I have one final question. Mark blinked. Another one. She smiled. This one is important. She opened the box, and inside was a smaller version of her glowing pendant. Reshaped and redesigned, now carried both Tylari and human symbols. Joined together at the center, gasps echoed around the hall. Even some of the Tylari elders stared with wide eyes. Mark stepped closer, heart racing. What does this mean? Ha, softly. Corellia looked into his eyes. In my culture, she said, this is not just a bond, not just a thread. It is an offering, a question that asks not, will you love me, but will you walk the rest of your life with me? Mark didn't move at first, not because he was unsure, but because of the emotion pressing in his chest. Then he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the original bridge pendant, the one she had returned. I kept it, he whispered. Every day, I kept it close. He took her hand, gently placed the bridge inside the ceremonial box, beside the glowing pendant. His voice was low but strong. Yes, I'll walk with you, Corellia, however far the stars go. The hall erupted in light as both pendants pulsed with brightness, not from power, but from recognition. Two threads, fully joined, no longer alien and human, just two souls. Days later, the ship continued its journey through space, but the crew had changed. They had seen something rare to different worlds, meeting not in battle, but in love. Corellia's presence was no longer questioned. Mark was no longer just a mechanic. He was a bridge between species. They didn't rush into ceremonies or titles. They didn't need to. They shared days and nights, stories and silence, and when Corellia would sit beside Mark, she often whispered, "Tell me again how humans love." And Mark would smile and say, "With words, with warmth, and with time." Then he'd add something new. "But with you, I think I've learned how aliens love too." And every time she heard that, her pendant glowed a little brighter.